Now on BBC One, Sophie Raworth with the news at 6.
At 6, Hugh Edwards is the presenter accused of paying a teenager for explicit photos. In the last few minutes, he has announced his resignation. The Serious Questions raises questions about the Sun's original story, which claimed the presenter had paid the young person more than £35,000 for photos. Tonight, there are yet more allegations, though, of inappropriate behaviour by the presenter, this time towards BBC colleagues. The corporation says it's resuming its own investigation. Also on the programme, the Bank of England warns that almost 1 million households will pay more than £500 more a month for their mortgages. At the NATO summit, G7 leaders formally agree long-term security commitments to Ukraine to help defence on land, at sea and in the air. Drama at Wimbledon as the defending women's champion is knocked out in the quarter-finals.
And everything's gone pink. We're live in Leicester Square for the European premiere of Barbie.
Also this hour, as drilling is almost complete, the controversy over London's first road tunnel in 30 years. Necessary to help congestion or bad for the environment?
Good evening. Well, in the last few minutes, the BBC presenter has been named as Hugh Edwards, the man who has been accused of paying a teenager for explicit photos, and he has said he is resigning. I'm joined now by our media editor, Katie Razzle, and Dominic Casciani, who is our legal correspondent. Katie, tell us more about what we have just learned in the last few minutes.
Well, yes, this will come as a huge shock to viewers. We've had a statement within the last few minutes from Vicky Flynn, who is the wife of Hugh Edwards, who named him as the BBC presenter facing allegations and said about her husband that he was suffering from serious mental health issues and is now receiving inpatient hospital care where he will stay for the foreseeable future. And she asked for privacy for her family. Now, as we've been reporting for days on the BBC now, there has been speculation ever since The Sun began to report on the presenter, and we haven't been able to name him. But this news will be such a shock to viewers, because
I must just correct something as well, because this is all breaking in the last few minutes. He has not resigned. He has been named by his wife. He has not resigned.
Yes, he's been named by his wife, and he is in hospital suffering serious mental health issues. It's a huge shock to all of us here at BBC News, of course, to announce this and that this has come in these last few moments. But you're right, we have had nothing about a resignation. What I would say, though, is that this is such dramatic news. I mean, this is a man who has embodied BBC values, has been the face of the BBC, has held viewers' hands through so many of the kind of momentous, significant parts of our nation's history, whether that's general elections, royal events, the Queen's death, of course, the King's coronation. So I think we're all coming to terms with this news. Clearly, we've been saying for some time now that we have known the identity of the presenter but haven't been able to name him for legal reasons. Now we are able to, and clearly there has been huge speculation online about this, but now definitively comes this news.
And Dominic, let's just talk to you as well. There's been a statement as well. There have been an awful lot of statements in the last few minutes, one from the Metropolitan Police.
There has, yes. And in fact, there's also been another more from Hugh Edwards' wife, which I think cases needs a few minutes to get across. Well, I'll read this statement from the police. So the police were handed information by the BBC earlier this week. So this relates specifically to the Sun's allegation that Hugh Edwards paid a 17-year-old for sexually explicit images. So this is at the heart of the allegations that they started. This is what detectives have now said. Detectives from the Met Specialist Crime Command have now concluded their assessment, so that's the material they've been passed and the information they've been given, and have determined there is no information to indicate that a criminal offence has been committed. In reaching this decision, they have spoken to a number of parties, including the BBC and the alleged complainant and the alleged complainant's family, both via another police force. There is no further police action. As such, the Met has advised the BBC it can continue with its internal investigation. We're aware of media reporting of further allegations against the same individual. No specific details or information about these allegations have been passed to us, and therefore there is no police action at this time. Should evidence of criminality or safeguarding issues be identified at any point, we would expect matters to be referred to the relevant police force. I mean, effectively saying we will do our job if needs be. But the important element there is no further police action. They've looked at the allegation, effectively as it first surfaced in The Sun, as it was passed to the BBC, and as it was then passed from the BBC to detectives. And they've decided there is nothing for them to do. There is no criminal allegation there. And it's quite an extraordinary moment that we have this situation where this leading television personality, on the one hand, has now effectively felt his family have felt he has to be identified over something which the police have decided tonight actually is not worth them investigating.
And he has been urged over the last few days by other BBC presenters to come forward and identify himself. And just to be clear, so Hugh Edwards has been identified. He has not resigned.
Absolutely. So we have now just received via the Press Association PA News Agency a longer statement from Hugh Edwards' wife, Vicky Flynn, who says, in light of the recent reporting regarding the BBC presenter, I'm making this statement on behalf of my husband, Hugh Edwards, after what have been 5 extremely difficult days for our family. I am doing this primarily out of concern for his mental well-being and to protect our children. Hugh is suffering from serious mental health issues. As is well documented, she says, he has been treated for severe depression in recent years. The events of the last few days have greatly worsened matters. He has suffered another serious episode and is now receiving inpatient hospital care where he'll stay for the foreseeable future. Once well enough to do so, he intends to respond to the stories that have been published. To be clear, she goes on, Hugh was first told that there were allegations being made against him last Thursday. In the circumstances and given Hugh's condition, I would like to ask that the privacy of my family and everyone else caught up in these upsetting events is respected. I know that Hugh is deeply sorry that so many colleagues have been impacted by the recent media speculation. We hope this statement will bring that to an end. So those are the words of his wife in the last few minutes.
Well, a major development on this story that has dominated the headlines for many days now. For now, both of you, though, thank you. The rest of the day's news now, and leaders from the G7 group of wealthy nations have announced a new security pact with Ukraine. The agreement, which was reached on the sidelines of the NATO summit in Lithuania, pledges more military support for Ukraine. Rishi Sunak heralded the pact as a new high point in international support for Ukraine. And the Ukrainian President Zelensky, stressed it wasn't a substitute for NATO membership, but said he was leaving the summit with a significant security victory for Ukraine. Our Europe editor, Katya Adler, reports now from Vilnius.
Our dear friend Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, welcome to you. Volodymyr, it's great to have you here.
Ukraine may not yet be a member of NATO, not by a long way. But today it was embraced almost as one of their own, taking part in a new council where Kyiv can raise concerns on an equal footing.
We've discussed in detail the confrontation with Russia and what can be done to keep Ukrainians safer. We're grateful to our partners for promising new packages of security and defense.
This may look like a conveyor belt of schmoozing with world leaders, but you'll notice Ukraine's president always wears combat fatigues. All this glad-handing has a concrete purpose. Back home, President Zelensky's country is burning, 500 days into Russia's full-scale invasion. Ukrainians care a lot about NATO.
NATO is our only protection from Russia. Otherwise, they'll never leave us alone.
If they will not help us, I think the situation in our country will be much worse than now.
In the corridors of power here, there's been lots of debate about why now isn't the time to make Ukraine a full NATO member. But The big picture here is that Ukraine and its defense against Russia's aggression is the focus of all the leaders at this summit. They're pledging long-term humanitarian and military aid, and this despite all of those countries facing a cost of living crisis at home. It's a big deal. Such a big deal, the British Defence Secretary remarked today off camera. He advised Kyiv not to treat allies like an Amazon for weapon supplies. The Prime Minister said he was confident Ukraine's president understood.
I know he and his people are incredibly grateful for the support the UK has shown, the welcome that we've provided to many Ukrainian families, but also the leadership that we've shown throughout this conflict.
A conflict NATO leaders know could go on for a long time. Don't we need to be honest with people at home here, with voters? This could take years, couldn't it?
Wars are by nature unpredictable, so I think no one can say with certainty how long this war will last. What we do say or state very clearly is that we will stand by Ukraine for as long as it takes.
NATO is being careful not to pile pressure on Kyiv over its counter-offensive against Russia. It's tough and slow. The grim reality of war.
Well, our Russia editor Steve Rosenberg is in Moscow, but first let's speak to Katya Adler, who joins us now from Vilnius. And Katya, has this summit revealed divisions between Ukraine and the West?
Well, I think, Sophie, we can safely say that the West is united behind Ukraine against Russian aggression. But what we have seen at this summit is that there is a tension between the realities of war decimating Ukraine, upending the security situation across all of Europe on the one hand, but on the other hand, the domestic political pressures on the shoulders of all these leaders. So if we think of Volodymyr Zelensky, his suffering people expect him to be able to come here to NATO and say to leaders, I want more weapons, expensive, sophisticated ones, and I want to become a member of NATO as soon as possible. They think that could and should happen. Then look at Joe Biden. He's facing an election in the US next year. There's a lot of pressure on him. He's taken a leading role over Ukraine here in Europe. He's pledged so much money and military aid as well. Then let's look at the UK. Rishi Sunak, Emmanuel Macron of France. Those countries are suffering a cost of living crisis. People there aren't going to be happy, perhaps, for the blank check for Ukraine for the long term. So, Sophie, it's tricky.
And Steve Rosenberg in Moscow, just how closely has the Kremlin been watching all of this?
Oh, very closely. I mean, the Kremlin has made that clear. And I think the Russians are very pleased, actually, that Ukraine hasn't got from this summit what it really wanted. In other words, a firm timetable for NATO membership. And on Russian state TV today, there's been a lot of gloating about that. Having said that, these G7 security assurances have not gone down well in Moscow. There's been reaction from President Putin's spokesman Dmitry Peskov. He said it would be a mistake and potentially very dangerous for countries to give security guarantees to Ukraine because they would infringe on Russia's security. He said that NATO was an offensive alliance that brought instability and aggression. Now, NATO would say, no, it is a defensive alliance, and as far as aggression is concerned, well, it wasn't NATO that launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine last year, it was Russia. But the general tone amongst Russian officials has been NATO is anti-Russia, NATO is on the warpath. That was the headline in the government paper today, and this fits with the wider Kremlin narrative, according to which Russia is a besieged fortress surrounded by enemies who are plotting from morning till night to destroy her.
Steve and Katya, thank you both. The Bank of England has warned that nearly 1 million households will see their mortgage payments rise by at least £500 per month by the end of 2026, and around 200,000 will have to pay even more than that, up to £1,000 extra. Mortgage costs have been rising rapidly as the Bank of England pushes up interest rates to try to curb inflation. It's not just homeowners who are being hit. Some buy-to-let landlords are either selling up or passing on higher costs to renters. And economists are expecting rates to be pushed up even higher next month. Our economics editor, Faisal Islam, is here with more.
Thanks, Sophie. So the Bank of England has calculated who and by how much the mortgage shock will hit as households roll off low fixed mortgage rates and face the reality of the rapid recent rate rises. Overall, by the end of the year, over 3 million mortgage holders face higher payments, 2 million up to £200 per month, 1 million between £200 and £500 per month. But stretch that out to the end of 2026 and you see there 2 million households in that middle bracket, payments up between £200 and £500 a month. And over there, 1 million households seeing a £500 per month increase. That's £6,000 per year. Now, this doesn't just affect homeowners, but renters too. The bank says that landlords on buy-to-let mortgages, often interest only, will see an increase by the end of 2025 of £275 per month. And 2 in 5 mortgaged landlords would see their rent fail to cover 125% of their mortgages, an important financial threshold. Given all that, it's perhaps surprising that across the economy, the bank thinks that the financial system is safe and sound and has enough spare funds. And also overall stress from high debt burdens, yes, it's rising, as you can see, but it won't get to the levels seen at the time of the financial crisis in 2007, or it will only if interest rates go much higher, to 8%. So for now, don't expect a return to that or the spectre of mass repossessions, says the Governor, Andrew Bailey.
You know, I don't think any of us want to go back to a world where the rate of repossessions of houses, if you go back to the early 90s, for instance, the recession of the early 90s, the rate of repossessions that was there, and obviously the effect that has on people and on families, we don't want to go back to that world. And I think we're in a much better place with a banking system that can support its customers.
So what's driving all this? There's a run-up in the rate markets are willing to lend to all the major economies as they expect higher interest rates to be needed. But you can see there at the end, since the beginning of last year, the UK's diverged somewhat on the reality of higher inflation here. Stuck at the moment above 8%, whereas today US inflation fell to 3%. That in turn is getting passed into those 15-year highs in mortgage rates, and not everyone's convinced that this can be painless.
Today's message will be cold comfort for households that are facing really big rise in interest rates, particularly those who are coming off fixed rate mortgages and facing an increase in repayments of something like £3,000 next year. So really big rise in mortgage payments that will feel very painful, very real for many families.
And that's the problem in a way. The bank wants to squeeze spending power in the economy overall enough to choke off inflation. But the pain of the process is very concentrated, not everywhere, but on a few million mortgaged households. Sophie.
Faisal, thank you. More strikes by teachers could hit schools in England after members of the NASUWT union voted in favour of taking industrial action over pay. It's one of 4 education unions seeking to gain a fresh mandate for action later this year. The government says its offer of 4.3% for most teachers is fair and reasonable. The government is weighing up whether to accept a recommendation from pay review bodies to increase wages for some public sector workers by as much as 6.5%. A final decision is expected within days. Our political correspondent Leila Nathu is at Westminster for us now. Leila.
Well, Sophie, we know that the independent pay review bodies, which cover about half of public sector workers, have made their recommendations to the government. This is for this year's pay. It's been a process slightly delayed, but there are 2 issues now for ministers, both the level of any pay award and how that pay award would be funded. Now, on the level, the review bodies are understood to be recommending between 6 and 6.5% increases. The government doesn't have to accept that recommendation, they usually do. But on the issue of how it's funded, we've got a strong indication from the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, that any pay award will not be funded by public sector borrowing.
Leila Nathu, thank you, and apologies for the quality of the sound. There was a problem with her microphone. The time is coming up to 6:20. Our top story this evening. Hugh Edwards has been named by his wife as the BBC presenter who has been suspended. And coming up later, drama at Wimbledon as the defending women's champion, Elena Rybakina, is knocked out in the quarterfinals.
And later on BBC London, free from allergens, we visit the school which could be the first in the country to create a menu that all pupils can eat. More at 6:30.
An exams marking boycott could mean some students at UK universities may not receive their grades this summer. The boycott is part of action being taken by members of the University and College Union at 145 UK institutions in a dispute over pay and working conditions. As Cameron Buttle reports, the action is causing some foreign students to fear they may not meet visa requirements and so be thrown out of the country.
Join me now, if you will, in showing what we think of these apology letters and certificates of completion.
For more than 400 years, graduates have been celebrating their final days at the University of Edinburgh. But rarely have they protested like this, angry that a marking boycott will mean that they won't be getting their degree certificates. As the faculty looked on, stony-faced, graduates paraded across the stage, wearing sashes and waving signs demanding pay your staff and ripping up letters of apology from the university. The action by the University and College Union affects 145 institutions across the UK. It means that some students' work won't be properly marked. Here at the University of Edinburgh, graduates affected will only be told if they have passed or failed. They won't be told how well they've passed or what grade they have achieved.
Education over profit.
For months, the students have been protesting at the university's response to the union's demand for improved pay and conditions. The marking boycott could have severe consequences for Canadian exchange student Emma Mackenzie. Without a proper result, she said she can't renew her visa.
Essentially, if I don't get my results in the next 2 weeks, which is very unlikely at this point, even if they made negotiations at this point, I probably wouldn't have what I need in order to apply for my visa in order to stay in the country. So it means that I will have to leave my flat, leave my livelihood here and go back to Canada.
But the university says everything is being done to get results out as quickly as possible.
All students will have built over the course of their time here a transcript of all of their work today. So what they will ultimately have in hand is sadly not a classified degree, but rather a sort of a statement around their completed studies, which they can use in the immediate future. But of course, we will be coming back to them to classify their degrees in due course.
The union says the blame for the disruption lies with the university bosses, claiming they have refused to return to negotiations. Further talks are now planned for the end of this week. Cameron Buttle, BBC News, Edinburgh.
Now, tennis. It has been a very busy afternoon at Wimbledon as the singles quarter-finals continues. Queen Camilla was among those watching as the defending women's champion was knocked out. Our correspondent Andy Swiss is there.
Yes, Sophie, welcome to Wimbledon, where, as you say, it has been another dramatic afternoon. Yesterday, the top seed lost in the women's singles, and today, the defending champion has lost, Elena Rybakina, in front of a very special guest. Meeting the Queen might make some nervous, but not Flo, the search dog. A relaxed welcome to centre court before Her Majesty watched the majestic. Elena Rybakina against Ons Jabeur, a repeat of last year's final. But would it be the same result?
Oh, yes!
Well, Jabeur began with her usual swashbuckling brilliance, but Rybakina isn't the champion for nothing. And she took a first set tiebreak. But in Jabeur's hands, a racket becomes a magic wand.
Incredible!
Winner followed winner. And after seizing the second set, revenge was finally hers.
It's not easy always playing her, but I wish we can exchange this match from finals last year, if I can.
But perhaps the sensation of these championships has been this man, America's Chris Eubanks, unheralded, unseeded, but utterly inspired.
Are you kidding me?
His skill and his showmanship has wowed the fans. After losing the first set, he won the next two. But third seed Daniel Medvedev came back to level the match and set up a thrilling decider. Meanwhile, the world number one Carlos Alcaraz is facing Holger Rune. It has been some battle, but Alcaraz has taken the first two sets. Well, the latest I can tell you is that Carlos Alcaraz leads by 5-3 in the third set, so just one game from victory. But Chris Eubank's dream is over. He lost that deciding set to Daniel Medvedev, but he has been one of the stars of this tournament, Sophie.
Andy Swiss with the latest there from Wimbledon. Thank you. Now, she was born in March 1959. That makes Barbie 64 years old. Tonight, she will walk the red carpet for the UK premiere of her first live-action Hollywood film, and it stars Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling as her on-off boyfriend, Ken. Our entertainment correspondent, Colin Patterson, is in London's Leicester Square for us tonight. Colin.
Could this be a blockbuster that is not a sequel and not about superheroes? It's Barbie, starring Margot Robbie as Barbie and Ryan Gosling as Ken. What it's about? Barbie has an existential crisis and decides to visit the real world. And this is not a film afraid to make fun of the doll.
Hi Barbie. Hi Barbie. Hi Barbie. Hi Barbie.
Barbie on the big screen.
Hi Ken.
The first ever live-action film to be based on the world's most famous doll. The hype and anticipation have reached such levels that there have even been slightly spurious stories about the movie creating a world shortage in pink paint. And fans arrived early this morning to bag their space for tonight's UK premiere.
Barbie literally proves that girls can do anything, but also like growing up watching the Barbie like animated movies, this is just so exciting to me to see it finally become a live action film.
We've been in Europe traveling, but we came to London especially for the premiere, yes.
What is it about Barbie?
Barbie is just so unique. She tells you to be yourself. We love the message that Barbie's sending, so love to be here.
What's going on? Why are these men looking at me?
Playing Barbie, Margot Robbie. The double Oscar-nominated actress who has also worked as a producer on the film for the last 5 years. She and the director, Greta Gerwig, were determined the script would not shy away from critiquing many of the values for which Barbie has stood.
Barbie's small and so petite, her clothes and figure look so neat.
Indeed, Barbie has had many detractors since she first launched in 1959.
Push the button for colour changes on all 8 fashion looks.
With accusations the doll created unattainable concepts of beauty.
Basically everything that men do in your world, women do in ours.
There have been differences in opinion between the filmmakers and Mattel, the toy manufacturing company behind Barbie, as to whether or not this is a feminist movie. And Barbie is hugely significant for Mattel. This is the first in what could be more than 40 films based on toys and games to which they own the rights.
Increasingly, studios and streamers are really looking for existing intellectual property, concepts and characters that audiences are already familiar with as a kind of incentive or an assurance that they will actually show up to watch the thing when it comes out.
If Barbie is big, then it could be followed by live-action film versions of Hot Wheels, Barney the Dinosaur, and even the card game Uno.
Barbie is a doctor.
It's worth saying that in 2016, Mattel did bring out a new range of Barbies with different body shapes, different skin textures, and different hairstyles. Margot Robbie, Barbie has just arrived. There was big cheers. Is the film any good? Well, we've not been allowed to see it yet. The reviews will be revealed next Wednesday.
You will have to let us know, Colin. Thank you. We're going to go back now to our main breaking story this evening, and that is that Hugh Edwards has been named as the BBC presenter who has been suspended. Our media editor, Katie Razzle, is with me now. An awful lot of developments in the last half hour. Just tell us what has happened.
Well, so yes, this is a fast developing story because within the last half hour, first the police announced that they decided there was no information to suggest criminality. That then passed it back to the BBC, who responded saying they would continue their investigation, which they had paused. And then minutes after that, Vicky Flynn, Hugh Edwards' wife, named him as the BBC presenter at the centre of this story. And it is worth really thinking about the significance of this, pausing and thinking about that, because the news of this officially knowing the name is very recent and will come as a shock to some people, even though there's been all sorts of media speculation and online, mainly social media speculation, because Hugh Edwards is such a significant person, not just for this programme and BBC News, but for viewers watching at home. He has been the embodiment of BBC values. He is somebody who has held our hand through some of the most important moments in the nation's history, if you like, when we're talking about general elections. He was there to cover them, very important royal moments, including, of course, announcing the Queen's death. His reputation has been tarnished through this time, even though people didn't necessarily know who he was. There was just so much speculation about it. And now, of course, we have this very sad news from his wife that he is suffering from serious mental health issues. We'd known before, and it had been in the public domain, that he had suffered severe depression, but she, in the past, and she says, she references that and just says that the events of the last few days have worsened matters. He suffered another serious episode and is now receiving inpatient hospital care, where she says he will stay for the foreseeable future. So it's a lot to take in for people, even though, we in the BBC have known this for a bit at BBC News. Other viewers may have known it, but it will still be a profound shock.
Our media editor, Katie Razzle, with the latest there. Thank you. Let's get the latest weather now from Matt Taylor.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Our weather, believe it or not, set to get even more autumnal as we head towards the weekend. So where is summer at the moment? I bet you wouldn't be thinking northern Lapland, but that is the case. This afternoon it was 30 degrees, a staggering 13 Celsius above where we should be for this stage in the year. And it was hotter still across the Mediterranean. Just some of the temperatures through this afternoon: 43 degrees in Malaga, 40 to the southeast of Italy and across Greece. And it's here it will get hotter still as we go through the next few days. Why? Well, we've got a big stubborn area of high pressure across the eastern Med in towards the west of Russia. That is drawing up air all the way from Africa up towards Finland. We're under the influence of this low pressure system, though, which is feeding in cooler air and plenty of shower clouds. They're still dotted around the country this evening. They'll continue for a few hours yet, with some showers just about possible anywhere. A lot of them will fade through the night, but a zone of thicker cloud and more persistent showery rain working its way southwards across Scotland. Temperatures much like they were this morning. For tomorrow morning, around 8 to 13 degrees. Now, as we go into Thursday, we will see a sunny start for some southern and eastern areas, but again, the shower clouds will get going. A cloudier zone across central southern Scotland and Italy. The showers heaviest across Scotland, but actually tomorrow, lighter winds, fewer and slightly lighter showers elsewhere across the country. Problem with the showers in Scotland, though, with winds so light, they'll be slow moving. Could see some large rainfall totals here. And because the winds are lighter, it will feel a touch warmer than today. Big heads up, though, as we head towards Friday and the weekend. This is going to be the big weekend spoiler. A deepening area of low pressure, which will spill its way in from the southwest. We'll already be producing gales across southwest England and South Wales on Friday. Rough seas as well, and that will spill rain in across much of the UK as we go through Friday. Heavy at times, and maintain a very unseasonable windy spell right the way into the weekend. Sophie.
Matt, thank you. And that's it from the BBC News at 6. The news continues, of course, here on BBC One. It's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. Goodbye.
Thank you and good evening. Coming up on tonight's BBC London. Necessary to help congestion or bad for the environment? The controversy over Silvertown as drilling is almost complete on London's first road tunnel in 30 years.
Drivers will have to pay to use these tunnels when they open in 2025. The big difference, though, with Silvertown is HGVs will be able to use it.
Also on the programme, could London face water rationing? A warning as Thames Water is questioned by MPs about sewage, leaks and debt. Plus, closely supervise your dogs this summer. A charity's plea to parents and carers to reduce the number of attacks on children. And performances out of the van to playing at Glastonbury. We chat to East London singer-songwriter Olivia Dean. A very warm welcome to you. We start with London's first road tunnel in over 30 years, and it's been controversial from the start. Now, as drilling for the £2 billion